everything is not a drug. Nobody wants to call things a drug. In the Andes, for example, coca growers, their big slogan is "Coca is not a drug." But cocaine is a drug, right? They say. This is saying this is something that only doctors should use. If somebody else uses it, it's bad. So we don't see our own drugs. We don't see alcohol or caffeine like drugs, but we see something that comes from another culture as a drug. These meanings, medical, cultural, criminal, all of these really add up to make our modern concept of drug. Say this is a good drug and this is a bad drug. So we separate them out, the good ones, the bad ones. How you use it, it depends on the dose, it depends on the culture. But every culture had a drug that was part of it. But over the last 500 years, with globalization, drugs have also globalized. But we could actually, the very first drug to be banned, or first thing to be prohibited, was the peyote in Mexico, where it was people were being encouraged to become more like white and Christian, more like European in their habits. Then peyote became a problem because it took people back to their old ways of thinking. Yeah, when we talk about drugs being demonized, it's a metaphor, but there's also a truth at the back of it. A lot of the war on drugs originated in attempts to spread what was at that time a very Christian Western culture, and from the very beginning a lot of these drugs, particularly ones that were used in traditional ceremonies, were seen as communing with the devil or being outside the sphere of Christian influence. They seem like rivals. Something like the peyote, and they see that there's a priest who gives it out and who gives it to people, and he and then they take it and they pray when they take it, and they burn the copal incense like the frankincense. It looks like the communion, it looks like there's this, we have to get rid of this and teach people the true communion. And we're trying to save souls for Christ, and the people who take the peyote, they're lost to Christ. We have to ban the peyote and bring them into, so we see that there's always a religious undercurrent behind this. I think in indigenous cultures, you don't really have the choice as to what this means. The meaning is already there. Part of your culture, you've heard about it from early on. That's the one thing that we can't do in a Western culture. We can't say, okay, I'm going to choose to have a authentic indigenous experience. I think our experience is always going to be different from that. And in a way you can say we have much more freedom, but in another way you can say the indigenous experience is more authentic, because we always have to invent our own framework. Always we have to find something, find a way of understanding the experience. So your psychedelic experience is not just in your head, you're surrounded by all the people in your life who are going to be important, and it's a very sacred moment when everybody is paying attention. The doctor is giving the drug to the patient. It's always a very private, nobody else is involved. In traditional ceremonies, to take the drug is always, it's a risk, it's an ordeal, you have to be brave. In clinical practice, it's like you just lie here and we'll give you the drug. It's very, very passive. It's very Western to try and go into places and go, okay, what's the drug? What's the psychedelic? Let us pick that out of the culture. In Native American culture, this is only part of a much bigger story. It's part of the culture, it's part of the ritual, it's part of everything else that's going on. He says psychedelics are super placebos, that they take, that they make people very suggestible. I think this also explains why if you take them in a good situation, you have an amazing experience, but if you take them in a bad situation, you have a horrible experience. This super placebo idea that they have the ability to harness, to get deep inside you, and your core and your ability to heal yourself. But then I ask myself, how do we fit this into Western medicine? Because Western medicine is all about testing the drug against the placebo. If it's just placebo response, then the drug's not working. But what if psychedelics really are about maximizing the placebo? How does Western medicine encompass that?
People have to decide, say this is a good drug and this is a bad drug. So we separate them out, the good ones, the bad ones.